You bet your ass it's important, okay? I don't want to be having a revolving door of coaches here. I want to try to make the best decision I can be and make it, the best decision possible. And, hopefully we can have somebody here for a long while.
That kind of sounded like Jack Nicholson in A Few Good Men there when he finally crapped. You bet your ass I ordered the code red. David Tepper making an important hire, and the hire's been made. And Peter King, Matt Rhule, the Baylor coach, becomes the head coach in Carolina. David Tepper said yesterday that Matt Rhule is his Chuck Noll. Hey, David, let's set the expectations a little more reasonably for a guy who had 1 year in the NFL as an assistant offensive line coach. I don't think Matt Rhule wants to carry around this burden that he's going to become a 4-time Super Bowl winner in a decade.
The difference between hiring a coach in 1969 and hiring a coach 50 years later is very simple. There aren't the secrets that there were. You can't go into predominantly black colleges and be smarter than everybody else, which the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Kansas City Chiefs were. They were way ahead of everybody. And there aren't that many secrets now, which is one of the reasons why I thought when Mike McCarthy told me 3 weeks ago that he was all in on analytics and wanted a 14-person analytics/video department, that owners were going to hear that, like David Tepper, and say, whoa, now that interests me. And Mike, look, I think there are two stunning things about Matt Rhule. Not that he's an NFL head coach, but he got the best first contract that an NFL head coach, has ever gotten. I'm talking about a first-time NFL head coach. I'm not talking about Gruden. I'm talking about the guys who get hired for the first time, and here they go, 7 years, $62 million. Mike, hey, look, it's an owner's money. He can do whatever he wants to do with it. But all I'm saying is that what happens after 3 years if they're 4-12, 5-11, 3-13. Matt Rhule's getting fired. He's not going to be coming back for a fourth year, and then they're going to owe him whatever, $40 million. And whatever, all of that is fine. I think the issue is all owners think that they have the answer. It could well be that David Tepper has the answer in Matt Rhule. I think he is a very good candidate. But you know what, Mike? I wrote in my column on Monday of this week, of all of the coaches who graduated from college football to the NFL in this century so far, in the first 20 years, I'm not including guys who cut their teeth in the NFL, like Bill O'Brien or Pete Carroll, but all the other guys who went from college football to the NFL. Only one of them has ever won a playoff game in the NFL, and that's Jim Harbaugh. Nick Saban was 15-17 and bailed. And so I like Matt Rhule, don't get me wrong, but the mania over Matt Rhule is a little bit weird to me.
Well, and Jim Harbaugh actually had some very deep NFL roots as a player, too. So it's not like, Matt Rhule has 1 year as an assistant offensive line coach with the New York Giants. That's it. He didn't play for a decade plus like Jim Harbaugh. So it's even more of an outlier. And I think the Chip Kelly experience may have caused teams to go the other way, away from college candidates. Greg Schiano did not thrive for very long or very well with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. There is a calculated risk here. And I want to get back, Peter, to the idea that David Tepper has blown up the coaching entry-level salary curve. There's an unspoken reality among owners that even though there's no salary cap for coaches, they don't pay coaches what they're truly worth. If Nick Foles is worth $22 million per year, there are 7, 8, 9 coaches at least worth as much or more. But that's not what happens. And I was told yesterday, too, there's an interesting dynamic. We never quite know exactly what coaches make because there are other entities that are owned by the owner of the team that funnel money to the coach. And some of these guys are north of $15 million a year, and we don't know it. But for entry-level coaches, the prevailing number is $5 to $7 million. So now that number's up north of 8, close to $9 million a year. You're going to have other guys like Josh McDaniels take notice. And, Peter, you're going to have guys like Sean McVay, who just did an extension a few months ago thinking, what the hell did I do? And you're going to have guys like Kyle Shanahan saying, I got 3 years left on my deal, and I'm worth more than Matt Rhule. I've proven it this year. When do I get my next contract? And this could spark a little bit of an arms race among owners, and they're going to resent it. They're going to be upset with David Tepper. He's going to get the cold shoulder when they get together in Florida in 2 months.
You know, Mike, you make two good points. Number one, David Tepper is not a member of the boys club yet. He just isn't. He hasn't been in a lot of owners' meetings. He hasn't had that, the Jerry Jones arm around the shoulder, hey, be careful what you pay or whatever. He's not in that thing yet. So, but I think there's one other thing that you said here that's really important. Let's think about the people who had leverage in recent years in the NFL. Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch had leverage because the 49ers stunk and Jed York was desperate. 6-year contracts. Wow, unbelievable. Joe Douglas with the New York Jets. He had leverage. I don't think he was going to take that job until they got to the 6-year mega dollars range. Generational wealth, as people would say. Now the same thing with Matt Rhule. Why did Matt Rhule make this money? I am convinced that it's because two things were at play. He had tremendous long-term assurance of great wealth, relatively speaking, at Baylor, with significantly less pressure than he will have with the Carolina Panthers. So he could have stayed there and had whatever he had left on his contract, 7 or 8 years, and he could have made whatever, $5 or $6 million a year, but with all these escalators that all these college coaches have. And there's one other point about this. Also, Matt Rhule had the New York Giants who wanted to talk to him, and there were all sorts of rumors out there that he was number one on the Giants list. And Mike, he might have been number one mentally on their list, but they hadn't talked to him yet. They barely knew Matt Rhule. And so they needed to sit down and talk to him. But when they were called and told what the money was like, they said, we're not doing that. And I was on with Chris Russo yesterday on his talk show, and he was screaming about it. Who cares? It's not a salary cap money. And I get that. I totally understand that. But what happened if you asked for 12 years, $130 million? Would you say the same thing? And so at some point you have to say the biggest contract ever, and this guy's been an assistant coach for an incoming coach, a rookie coach. And he's coached 1 year in the NFL. It's just, hey, look, they could well be right. And you're right. The money doesn't apply to the cap. It's a tremendous amount of money and a tremendous commitment to Matt Rhule.
There's been a little hint, a little whiff, a little tinge of collusion when it comes to what coaches make over the past 30 or 40 years. We've seen the revenues skyrocket, the players' salaries go through the roof. The coaches have not kept pace at that same percentage growth. And that's why David Tepper is going to get not the arm around the shoulder, maybe the foot in the rear end, especially from John Mara, who didn't even get a chance to talk to Matt Rhule because David Tepper was taking the entry-level salary structure and blowing it up. It's going to be an issue for Tepper because you're right. He's not a member of the boys club yet, and it may be harder for him to become one now that he has potentially lit the fuse on an explosion of coach salary.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.